Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. All right, welcome back to the program. Like I did announce at the beginning of the program, I have the pleasure of welcoming the Honorable Minister of Finance and the Coordinator of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, in his first exclusive and candid interview amidst this protest. Mr. Wale Edun, good morning and welcome, Honorable Minister.
Morning, Nancy, and thank you for having me.
Now, fantastic. Let's get started, and I think I will start with the elephant in the room, which is the introduction of the twin policies by government. President Tinubu announced on May 29, 2023. There are questions as to how, if there was strategic thinking behind President Tinubu's announcement as to the measurement of the social outcomes, which we've seen by the ripple effect of fuel subsidy removal that has exacerbated transport cost, food cost, as well as the Naira devaluation in terms of having those two powerful, bold policies at the same time. And we've seen Nigerians crying on the street. It has also worsened public anger. I would like you to speak as to what immediate steps is the government taking now. I said immediate, not short. Immediate steps that government is taking now to alleviate and reduce food that is hunger as well. I was at the market some weeks ago. So let's humanize this, because sometimes we are lost in like so much English or esoteric. And I was almost mobbed in the market. Oh, Nancy, I know they tell government what's in there happen. A man actually saw me and said he has 4 children. His children has dropped from school. And he did like this, I'm choking. And I tried to explain, okay, now small, government, they work, this and this. But they were not taking what I was saying. So, Honorable Minister, what immediate steps is the government doing now to make hunger, to reduce hunger? So.
Thank you, Nancy. Let me start by where, in fact, Mr. President started a couple of days ago to say that the protest, the recent protest has been saddening in the aftermath, which has led to loss of life, destruction of property, and violence. That is very, very saddening. And of course, we continue to call for an end to the protest and the embracing of dialogue. We should never stop taking the opportunity, and the door is wide open for dialogue with all sections of the population. Having said that, the issue of the heightened cost of living, as we know, it is a fallout of the macroeconomic reforms. And before I come to the issue of the specific measures being taken now, it is important to lay the backdrop that when these decisions were taken by Mr. President, bold, courageous, and necessary decisions, the country was on the verge of bankruptcy. There was no way you could sustain living. We're living on borrowed time and living on borrowed money. That was put to an end by stopping the wasteful expenditure on subsidy, and also by stopping the ill-managed and very, very opaque foreign exchange regime. It was known that making those measures, implementing those measures would lead to a spike in the cost of living. It would be inflationary in the short term. That was known, and that was why the measures to counteract the spike in the cost of living were put in place. And I must say this, the measures have been successful. They are bringing the economy to where it should be. Revenue of government, which it needs, is going up. The exchange rate is stabilizing. The deficit is reducing. Foreign exchange inflows are being attracted into the country. And so at the macroeconomic level, you know, the debt servicing as a percentage, the amount spent on debt as a percentage of revenue is falling sharply. So at the overall level, at the macro level and the fundamental level, things are falling into shape. The issue is that at the micro level, there's yet to be a drilling down to where people experience life.
So isn't that a disconnect? Because the macro should impact the micro too. It
is because in a reform process, in a macroeconomic reform process, the costs come first. It's front-loaded. The costs come first, and then the benefits begin to seep through. And that is why a well-measured, well-tailored intervention program is necessary. Right now, let us go to the heightened cost of food. There are many reasons for it, and what matters now is that the intervention is to put food in the marketplace that is plentiful, that is affordable. And as you know, there's been distribution, and there's ongoing distribution of free food by the government through the states and through other bodies. 10 trucks each, 20 trucks each were given to all the states. And furthermore, there is further distribution of rice by the government free of charge. And in addition, the markets will feel the benefit of rice at a subsidized price to the market price to help to, one, influence the current market price, and two, to help bring out some of the stores, what is in the stores that may be being hoarded and being kept aside and being speculated upon. It will help to bring out that inventory, I will call it, of food and rice in particular. So there is an attempt to immediately impact the price of food. That's in a very, very immediate term. And linked to that is the people's ability to afford that food. And as you know, we have a direct benefits program to transfer money directly to the pockets and to the accounts of the poor and the most vulnerable, which Mr. President always said he would not leave behind.
How has that been going? Yes.
That process, the truth is that process was started late last year. It ran into difficulty of transparency, honesty, and integrity. So it has been revamped, and it was started again in March using technology, making sure that each individual was identified biometrically, and they were paid through their bank account or their mobile wallet. They were paid digitally. It started again in March. It took some time to ramp up, but now those payments are running at 1 million per month. So 1 million households are being paid per month.
Okay, per month, because I know that the target is 15 million households,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken. But Nigerians are saying they don't also know who these people are that are collecting these monies. That's one. And I want to follow up on some of the things you've talked about. 740 trucks of rice to states. The Minister of Information did announce, I think, 1,225 kg. And I think there's about 24,000 trucks. Is there a monitoring process as to how these foods are being shared? That's one. And number two, that is also a token. I mentioned last week on the show that you don't run a government on palliatives, as it were. That will also take me to the short-term measure of government, because if indeed you are even sharing rice, you can't continue to share rice. Yes. What an average Nigerian wants to see is a good economy where I can fend for myself and take care of my children. So that's one. The second one also is this conditional cash transfer, yes, which you've talked about. Speak to me also about what is happening around the humanitarian ministry, because I know that the president gave you the mandate to be able to look at that area. What's happening on that? Then linked to it too is the third question around food import duties, yes, which the president has announced, and I think it will end by November, if I'm not mistaken, I think 150 days on brown rice and some other commodities. Some analysts are also saying that is discouraging local food production.
In terms of the immediate term, we have talked about, as you said, the distribution is a release from reserves to help people to overcome the immediate term. The answer in the short, medium, and long term is for Nigerians to produce, to grow, and to produce, and to harvest, and to process their own food. And in that sense, we have underway currently an initiative to produce maize and to produce rice. We have an initiative in line with the World Bank. We have repurposed funding available on the Nigerian Agricultural Growth Scheme of the African Development Bank, together with some funding from the Japanese International Cooperation Agency. And that is going to produce, grow 250,000 hectares of maize. And that will produce about 800,000 metric tons. And in addition, at the same time, there will be 500,000 hectares of rice, which is going to be planted, and that will produce about 1.5 million metric tons of rice. So these are in the immediate term for the next season. We are almost out of the first planting season. We accept that, but we are still going to chase the last of this current planting season, and the next dry season we will have fertilizer and seeds will be provided to the small-scale farmers in particular, but as I mentioned, the amount of acreage that will be planted, and that is the answer to food affordability, food availability. One thing that we learned from in the past was that despite the difficulties, the last maize season, there were 277,000 hectares of maize was planted, and of wheat, sorry, was planted, and it was very successful. But we do have the issue of food going across the border, which is one of the issues in terms of food supply. But the point here is that there is a concerted effort to ensure that we have homegrown food available. In the short term, as you said, there is, apart from what is being distributed from reserves, there is a window has been opened for importation, because the commitment of Mr. President is to drive down those prices now and make food available now. However, it is not going to be at the expense of our local farmers. So one of the conditions for this importation will be that everything available locally in the markets or with the millers and so forth has been taken up. We'll have auditors that will check that. So the condition under which people will be able to import is that they have gone and they have patronized local farmers. That is what will stop our local farmers from being discouraged by this emergency measure. When you talk about the transfers, that the whole point of resetting was that we'll be able to provide a dashboard. We'll be able to say, these are the people that have been that have received these funds. This is how much they received. This is where they received it. And to save the privacy of people, I think it will start maybe at the ward or the local government level. Those dashboards are ready, and in due course, they can and will be publicized. People will be able to scrutinize them. That was the whole point of resetting the direct payments. And why I'm emphasizing this is that we are in a reform process which is midstream, and we have to have the courage, the determination to see it through to better outcomes. And so we will continue, in some cases, to intervene on those worst affected until things get better. And of course, with the kind of food production program we have, inflation will come down as prices come down. When inflation comes down, exchange rate will stabilize, interest rates will come down, and the economy will have a chance. People will have a chance at reasonable rates to invest in various sectors of the economy, increase productivity, grow the economy, and create jobs, which is the key to reducing poverty.
Okay, Minister, you said a lot, so let me try and unpack those things that you've said. How many people now have been given cash?
Right now, it's about 4.3 million. But the last million was in the last few weeks. And when I say we're ramping at a rate of 1 million per month, it's an ongoing process. So we are expecting to be able to do 1 million per week or 1 million every 2 weeks. We keep increasing. Once you have your technology right, you can now increase. And as I said, why we need to have the facility to reach people quickly is that we are in an ongoing process, and there will always be a time when you want to intervene on behalf of the poorest and the most vulnerable.
Where is this money coming from? Is it borrowed?
When we talk about borrowing, this particular money, $800 million, is under a World Bank program,
yes.
but it's under an International Development Association program, and that money is for 40 years at 1%. So if you say it is borrowing, well, it is, but it is the softest and the cheapest and the most affordable form you can get. The rest will come from the Nigerian federal budget.
Okay. There is the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Reforms and Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms chaired by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. What's the status of the recommendations on the executive order on inflation reduction and emergency economic intervention bill? Yeah,
I think the best way to answer that, Nancy, without evading it, is to point out that in undertaking the reforms that were very necessary for the economy, there was also side by side a full program of interventions that dealt with every section of the society and every sector of the economy. So therefore, there is direct payments to the poorest and the most vulnerable. There is seeds, fertilizer for farmers to bring new acreage under production, as well as other incentives, including relatively cheap funding. For the nano enterprises, there are 50,000 naira grants for 1 million nano enterprises. For the small and medium scale, there's 1 million naira funding at 9% per annum, and then for the bigger medium-sized enterprises, there's also up to 1 billion naira financing at 9% per annum. So that's dealt with all those, and it's also a way to make sure we increase production, and all these things are aimed at bringing down inflation. And then for the largest companies, there are the import waivers, the fiscal measures to help them bring down their costs. Withholding tax eliminated for manufacturing sector as a whole and small-scale businesses as well, so that their working capital is preserved. VAT on CNG vehicles and also CNG conversion kits, which is another intervention for the urban commuter to bring down the cost of transportation, because as you know, a CNG-fueled vehicle, they cost 30% of the cost of petrol. So if you fill a tank for 15,000 with the petrol, you fill it for roughly 5,000 for CNG. And what I will also point out is that it has taken time to deliver and to ramp up these interventions. But the commitment is there. The determination is there. So it's a question of trying and trying and trying until the success is achieved. By this month, the CNG buses, which took time given what's happening in Ukraine and elsewhere, and the supply disruptions, has taken time to bring them in and to bring in the kits and do conversion, will now begin to roll out. So although any difficulty that is met along the way, there's the determination to keep trying. And I believe that is what Nigerians would expect in terms of the programs that have been promised them, that have been outlined for them, and that surely will be delivered to them.
These policies, as you're enumerating it, Minister, seems laudable, but the issue is the lag effect, you know, the timing. Since the president announced it, it's as if, oh, president just announced without us having in place those social measures that will help us cushion that effect. I don't know, you must have seen the African Development Bank report or the Nigeria country focus report that told us that Nigeria's inflation is, you know, more than West African average as well as African average. Now, that brings me to the question around if indeed there is coordination between monetary and fiscal policy. And let me situate my question. At all the MPCs I've attended since Yemi Cardoso came in as central bank governor, he's always been speaking in his communique, let there be fiscal and monetary policy coordination. And I'm asking the optics, because it seems there's an increase in interest rates. You just also mentioned earlier that let's begin to see a reduction in interest rate. I know that the minister, your PAMSEC of finance, I see her all the time at the meeting. What kind of coordination is going on now between monetary and fiscal policy? Because it seems the central bank is heightening interest rates, which seems not to also be controlling inflation as to how they want to control it. Government on the other side, fiscal side is also, you're sending, I think the president sent 6 trillion naira to NAS some weeks ago to add to this year's budget. So more spending. So as the coordinator of the economy, how do you handle this? I understand that there will be trade-offs, but how do you balance the trade-off between inflation control as well as growth as well as naira volatility?
Thank you. What you've said last is the most important, that yes, even as the central bank is leading a charge against the fight against inflation, we need to grow the economy. And I'll give you 1 or 2 instances where we have done that, taking equity, taking our own savings to do that. And there are 2 critical areas. One is when you look at the private-public partnerships for major infrastructure projects that are linking all the ports and all the states of the south with the Lagos to Calabar highway, as well as the Sokoto-Badagry highway that is linking so much farmland, dams, towns and villages coming from north to south. Those are being funded with private-public partnerships, but with the government finding its own equity to put down. And of course, you can imagine the construction-related boom that is flowing from those particular projects. But the other area in which we are attempting, while fighting inflation, to grow the economy, and America did it successfully. Not many others did, but America, while bringing down the rate of inflation, was also growing, and that's what we are determined to do. The other area is that we have savings, and we have found a way of taking within the limits of the law, and I'll emphasize that. There's no, Mr. President stands for rule of law. And a level playing field and sanctity of contracts. Within the law, we have approval, and will shortly be announcing a real estate fund, which on the one hand, our pension funds are able to invest in within their limits at their normal rates of return, and at the same time, we will blend it with some of this concessional financing at 1%. And as a result, we will be able to write for Nigerians 25-year low-interest mortgages. That in itself will spark a boom in housing construction, because once you have off-takers for property, the banks will finance construction and the developers will go to town. That is a major driver that we are looking to grow the economy at the same time, as you said, fighting inflation, which the central bank governor has indicated is a priority of the central bank and is well within its mandate. But also, in terms of coordination, you yourself said it, Nancy, the PAMSEC Finance is on the Monetary Policy Committee. In addition, we have a Monetary and Fiscal Coordination Committee that meets. We meet regularly. And if you want to look at the evidence of monetary and policy coordination, you only have to look at when the central bank indicated that inflation would be around 21% by the end of the year. Interest rates were much lower than that, more negative, a disincentive to all investors. So the government, through the Ministry of Finance and the Debt Management Office, took on the challenge of paying higher interest rates on our domestic debt so that we could help the central bank, one, achieve its inflation target, but more importantly, attract foreign flows into the country, which has helped the central bank to pay down some of its, to pay down virtually all of its outstanding foreign obligations. So that's where you get coordination of monetary and fiscal policy. I know it sounds a bit sort of high level and complex, but it's important to just say that we're on the same page in a very robust way. So the central bank does not, and we have not gone to the central bank to say, please lend the government money to pay its debt, to pay its salaries.
That's ways and means.
The ways and means. We have not gone, in fact, we have used market instruments to pay down what we owed. And that is a very, very germane aspect of having a strong economy.
But, Minister, at the National Assembly just a few days ago before the protest, there were, attention was being drawn to increasing the ways of means of government from 5% to 10%. Why is that?
I think the legislators, they do have a right to pass laws as they see fit. And I think what happened here was that there was an old legislation which actually they had passed for a 15% limit on ways and means, which means 15% of last year's revenue is the limit the government could borrow temporarily. If you obey the letter of the law, wherever it goes to, you have to pay it down by the end of the year, just like people do at the end of the month with their credit cards. But the point here is that it was raised to 10%. It doesn't mean it will be used. It doesn't mean it will be used. It's there as a fail-safe. Sometimes it just gives that extra flexibility so that if a payment needs to be made and there's a mistiming, there's a gap between the time at which the revenue will come in and the expenses needed, you can just draw down briefly. So the aim, once the aim is to keep within the letter of the law, I think that's the main point.
Okay, since we're talking about the quality of spending, what majority of Nigerians also, we're also on the street is talking about quality of spending and sustainable spending amid responsible borrowing, to which I'll come to in a short while. Quality of spending as to how many billions of naira is being spent on presidential jets, for example. I know you would have monitored the protest on VP's house and all of that. Can you speak as to that? Because a lot of analysts that I've interviewed here over the years do say that we don't even have a revenue problem. The problem we have is a spending problem. We spend on frivolous things. Government officials, government authorities live very frivolous lives at the expense of poor Nigerians.
I think when you look at the budget, essentially, when you look at the recurring budget, it is mainly personnel costs, salaries and pensions, and the overheads, which is what the ministries basically spend on themselves. The ministries, departments, and agencies is a relatively small, maybe 10%. So that's not an area to look for huge savings. Where to look is in, as you say, the quality of spending on projects. And in that sense, what has happened is that in order to bring greater visibility and, of course, greater accountability to the public purse, to the money of Nigerians that is spent on capital projects, we've implemented something akin to exactly what happened with the direct benefits, direct payments program. There was a time at which the payments were going out in bulk. and now it is directly to each identified individual to their account, which is as it should be. That is the improvement. That same improvement has been made under the 2024 capital budget, where once procurement is complete, the payment is not made to a ministry or to a third party. The payment goes directly to the consultant, the contractor, the supplier, the counterparty of government. And that will have a huge effect on the quality of spending across the board, in terms of timeliness, in terms of the efficiency, in terms of the fact that funds will go directly to who they should go to. And so that is a new innovation under the 2024 budget, and it is in line with what Nigerians expect: quality, visibility, efficiency, and integrity of spending of their tax money.
But Minister, it's not seeming like that, because that's why many people were on the street, at least in the last few days. That is not seeming like that. We have a government that is really living so much, you know, on a largesse. Meanwhile, we have many poor Nigerians. So I would still like you to address that part, which I did mention earlier, in terms of the quality of spending around government corridors. You know, I did mention perhaps presidential jets. Do we need many? VP's housing, so much, because these are demands, you know, made by protesters. And that will also lead me to another question around what you mentioned earlier in terms of infrastructure. We know we do have infrastructural deficits that has also worsened the structural problems that we have. What are the plans for funding? There's a Lagos-Calabar highway. Are we going to borrow to do all that? And the next question is, are we living on borrowed money right now? Let me also tie that to the minimum wage adjustment. Where are you going to get the money to adjust for minimum wage? Is it also starting from April, bearing in mind that the last law ended in April? Is it going to start? Are you going to pay the backlog from April? And where are you going to get that money from? Let me also tie it to the Eurobond issuance, the next one by October. I would like you to speak about that too. Yes.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Let me start with the issue of the expenditure. You know, clearly there are times when there's a perception that funds are not being judiciously used. There may be, for example, a seminar abroad and so on and so forth, and I think that has to be dealt with. That has to be dealt with. It's important that government is seen to spend the public money judiciously, and I think it's an ongoing exercise. We have a right from time to time and an obligation to look at any given time at the pattern of expenditure and to make it as tight as possible, given that it is public funds. In terms of government borrowing, if you look in dollar terms, the overall borrowing, and a lot of people measure the dollars, the credit rating agencies, they measure in dollar terms. The creditors, they measure in dollar terms. And between December 2024 and now, the federal government's borrowing has gone down from $108 billion to 91. That's the direction you want it to go in. In Naira terms, of course, it is more, but at least what you look for the metric, you look for at least where there is progress. And likewise, as I said, the debt service obligation to revenue is down drastically from 97% to 68%. And so when I point out that we have signs that we are going in the right direction, and what we must be determined to do is to maintain those trends. Those trends will take us to where we want to go. And you've got to, when you say where will we get money from, the Ministry of Petroleum through the NNPC has committed to 2 million barrels a day.
By when?
2 million barrels a day at $80 a barrel takes us out of the woods, not just in the short term, but the medium term, because we will rally around that additional infusion of not just income, but foreign exchange to get the economy going and to attract investors and to bring down the exchange rate bring down inflation, bring down interest rates. So it's an important commitment. When you say by when, we have to go back to NNPC and say to them by when. But that's their commitment, and we need that. We need to use what we have and to relieve the burden on Nigerians. And one of the key ways is that.
Okay, Minister, that brings me to the issue of fuel subsidy. We know that fuel subsidy isn't totally gone. Because I did remember some months ago, I think earlier this year during Gelale, the presidential spokesperson did mention at the time when fuel price was going up, okay, that we should leave it at this. So what is exactly happening right now? Is there a strategy for us to finally exit the fuel subsidy? Because why, you know what I'm talking about, and you know where my question is leading to. Because if, assuming there's total fuel subsidy removal, what we're buying at the pumps now will be more than that. So there is fuel subsidy right now. And where is that money coming from?
Let me take it first of all this way. The fuel subsidy was removed on May 29, 2023 by Mr. President. And at that time, the poorest 40% were only getting 4% of the value. So basically, they were not benefiting at all. So it was going to just a few. The other point I think is important to make is that nobody knows the consumption in Nigeria of petroleum. We know we spend $600 million every month on importation. The issue here is that all the neighboring countries are benefiting. So we're buying not just for Nigeria, we're buying for the countries to the east, almost as far as Central Africa. We're buying for countries to the north, and we're definitely buying for countries to the west. And so we have to ask ourselves as Nigerians, how long do we want to do that for? I think that's the key issue regarding this issue of petroleum pricing.
Yeah, but the issue is that government also has a responsibility to fix the dysfunctionalities. If we are buying for the rest of West Africa, it's the duty of government to be able to seal those leakages.
What you are saying, Nancy, is that we should block our borders. That's really it. You're saying we should block our borders.
And there's
a level of incentive.
Or customs, rather.
There's a level of incentive which it is like trying to hold the sea back. There's a level of incentive financially. There's a level at which if the two prices are different, those who are willing to invest heavily in buying low and selling high and paying some costs are many, and they are varied, and they will be determined because the rewards to that type of behavior are huge, and the answer is in the pricing. So I think that is the way we should look at that issue. We should look at it as, what are we going to do to fundamentally deal with this arbitrage?
HM, I don't know if I'm getting clarity as to if there's still fuel subsidy from your answer. I'm trying to get clarity from what you just said.
No, there isn't. There's no fuel subsidy in the budget.
There's no fuel subsidy?
There's no fuel subsidy in the budget. That is the truth. That is the technical fact. Where, you know...
But we're not still buying at a premium, because if you take a look at oil price, international crude oil price, the price now, landing cost is high and all of that. Pump price now is even supposed to be more than it is right now if we adjust. But we're still buying at about 600, 700 in Abuja. In other parts of the country is more expensive than that. It could actually also be more expensive than that. So there's a mismatch somewhere. Someone is paying for that mismatch.
Well, I think that's it. And I think, you know, there are people, the organization that have a responsibility to make sure for security reasons that there is fuel. But that doesn't mean that there's a subsidy in the budget. And I think, Nancy, the real issue for you to put on the table is that how can you be subsidizing all your neighbors and expect the people of your own country to get ahead, to progress, and to enjoy the benefits that they should be enjoying?
Let's talk about the announcement and also suspension of some taxes, like sugar tax, cyber levy taxes, and all of that. I would like you to give us clarity in terms of regulatory clarity, you know, and guidance right now? Because it seems that the government will say this now, later it will backtrack. And your administration will say, okay, we are hoping, we are hearing from Nigerians, but people are saying that is regulatory uncertainty too. So I would like you to speak to that as the signals to both companies as well as investors. Where
we are is that on VAT, a plethora, a whole range of items from CNG to pharmaceutical products and so forth are exempt from VAT. It's an executive order. I will sign it. It is currently with the Ministry of Justice. Withholding tax, which essentially saves the working capital of companies, is removed for all manufacturing, many small and medium-scale enterprises, food production, food processing companies, a whole range, and it will be listed in an executive order, which I am also authorized to sign. The Inflation Reduction Act will now contain a range of import duty exemptions, lowering of tariffs, and outright tax breaks. For instance, for employment, if you employ more people, you'll be given a tax break against it. So that range of fiscal incentives will also be laid out in an executive order which Mr. President will in due course sign.
Do we have a timeline to that? What you can measure, you can manage?
I would say that in the next week or two, it should be out. It has to go through certain regulatory, certain legal processes, but there is nothing holding it up except just the administrative processing, which we will ensure will be quick. And it's important to point out that these are steps taken to counteract the costs of industry, which have been elevated chiefly by the movement in the exchange rate. For companies that import and process and add value to raw materials, of course, their costs have gone up. And so these are ways of helping them manage that cost.
Let's come to the windfall tax, because we have less than 3-4 minutes to the end of the show. Let's come to windfall tax, and I want clarity as to that. The Banks Directors Association of Nigeria have kicked against the windfall tax. They're saying, okay, you are taxing the FX gains. How about why not taxing talking about giving them credit for FX losses? That's one. Then we talked about debt earlier, the debt to GDP ratio. Currently, our debt to GDP ratio is over 50%. What are the plans to bring it down to, I think, 40%, that which is the fiscal responsibility standard? Then, thirdly, as we finalize this interview, I have so much to ask you, but it seems that time has gone by. The president said that 570 billion naira have been shared to states in the Sunday broadcast. You are in the National Economic Council. What type of plans are on to alleviate hardship since the states now receive more money? But I've also discussed with a few commissioners of finance in states, and they tell me, Nancy, we receive more naira, but inflation not be like that. So it's not as it seems. So that is also an excuse now by the states, even though they are receiving more naira, not to do so much with the naira they receive.
Thank you. In terms of the your first question,
windfall tax.
On the windfall levy, if I may say, it was passed as a levy, so it's not a tax. In terms of your windfall levy, I think where you have unearned income, where you have a section of the society or a set of, or an industry or a set of companies that earn money through not through dint of hard work of their own, the society deserves a chance to share some of that, and it's just redistribution of that. So I think that takes care of the issue of the windfall levy. It's done everywhere else in the world where you have, especially the energy sector as well as banking. In terms of the debt to, I'm not sure our debt ratio is above 50%, but the idea is that as we grow our revenue, as we grow our GDP, as we grow the economy, and the economy is growing. The economy is growing, and it is growing above the population growth. That will take care of the debt to GDP level.
States.
And as far as states are concerned, the 570 actually refers to a reimbursement that they received around December, from December last year onwards. and it was a reimbursement, I think, under the COVID financing protocol. But the point is that the states have received more money. They have received more money.
We had to do our research, and it's that on the screen there.
There is, and let me end where you started by saying that Mr. President's charge to the states was that, tell us, we have elevated food prices right now. We have shortage. We need to produce more. Even if it's going across the border, we need to produce more. Tell us, in each ward, each local government, each state, what you need and what you bring to the table in terms of food production.
Okay. Minister, just 30 seconds, and Director, please allow me. How much influence is the World Bank and IMF influencing our policies? Because they say you just listen to World Bank and IMF. If they say okay, you are okay with them.
They give us advice, and we do take concessional financing from the World Bank. As for the IMF, more often than not, we disagree with them, and we don't have anything from them other than what was inherited. Which
was the SDR, I guess, during COVID.
Which was the COVID financing.
Okay. I think, Minister, let's leave it at that. So many questions to ask you, but I know that I will get to catch you on another, and I will ask you more questions. But thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Nancy.
All right, I've been speaking with the Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy on a cocktail of many issues concerning the economy of the country. Thank you all for being a part of the show. Of course, Mr. Wale Edun, the Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinator of the Economy, has been speaking to me in the last few minutes. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Be the best you can be. I'm going to change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye now. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.